I've never been the kind of person who believed in ghost stories, but that night at the amusement park, something in me changed forever. We were just looking for something light to do after dinner, something to break up the routine. My boyfriend Lucas has always loved places like that, so amidst laughter and playful teasing, we agreed to check out the city park. It was an ordinary evening, not too crowded, and the calmness of the place seemed perfect to relive a few childhood memories. As we strolled through the brightly lit park avenues, everything seemed normal. The colorful lights flickered above our heads, and the distant sound of Ferris wheels turning filled the air. Somehow, though, there was something odd about the atmosphere. It wasn't an obvious feeling, but a subtle unease, like something unseen was watching us from afar. Still, I tried to brush it off. I didn't want to come across as paranoid. It was Lucas who suggested the funhouse. "Come on, it'll be fun," he said with a grin. I hesitated for a second, recalling how much that place used to give me the creeps as a kid. But seeing his excitement, I agreed. As soon as we crossed the entrance, a shiver ran down my spine. The air inside felt colder than outside, like we were stepping into a place where time didn't flow the same way. I laughed, trying to shake off the discomfort. Lucas was ahead of me, looking completely carefree. "Don't be silly," I thought to myself, following him into the maze of mirrors. Little did I know that decision would change everything. Inside the funhouse, everything seemed like any other park attraction. Lucas and I laughed as we saw our distorted images in the first mirrors. It was funny how our bodies stretched or squashed in impossible ways. But as we went further, something in the atmosphere started to shift. The laughter gradually faded, and the fun was slowly replaced by an uncomfortable feeling, as if the mirrors were beginning to reveal something deeper than just simple illusions. I walked past one of the mirrors and noticed something that made me stop. My reflection looked normal at first glance, but there was something in my eyes. They seemed empty. Dark in a way I couldn't explain. For a moment, I stood there, staring at that reflection, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was just the play of dim lights, or maybe my tiredness was playing tricks on me. "Hey, come on," Lucas called, already ahead, still laughing at some new funny distortion he had found. I shook my head and kept walking, trying to shake off that strange feeling. But the further we went, the more unsettling the reflections in the mirrors became. They weren't just funny distortions anymore, they were images that seemed wrong somehow. In one of them, I saw a shadow passing behind me. I quickly turned around, but of course there was nothing there. When I looked back, the shadow was gone. The discomfort started to grow inside me, but Lucas seemed oblivious to everything. He was playful, eagerly exploring the corridors. I didn't want to ruin the fun, so I tried not to think too much about what I was seeing. Even so, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. As we ventured deeper into the maze, the mirror distortions shifted from playful visual tricks to something darker. Each mirror seemed to twist our images in more grotesque ways, almost as if they were trying to show us a corrupted version of ourselves. The light, once soft and yellow, now felt dimmer and flickering, as if something was draining the life from the space around us. Then it happened. We stopped in front of a large mirror at the end of a corridor. Lucas was distracted by something off to the side, but I froze, staring at my own reflection. At first, I thought it was just another random distortion. My face looked the same, but the smile staring back at me wasn't mine. It was darker, more sinister. And unlike the other mirrors, this reflection didn't mimic my movements. My heart started to race. I slowly raised my hand, but the reflection remained still, its eyes locked onto mine as if it were watching me. The smile grew wider, almost grotesque, while my lips in reality didn't move at all. The reflection wasn't just different. It seemed like it wanted to break through the glass to reach me. "Lucas?" My voice trembled, but he was still distracted. Panic started to rise inside me. I wanted to pull away from the mirror, but my legs were frozen. Then I saw the reflection move its hand. Not mine, but its own. It touched the surface of the mirror as if trying to break through. "Lucas?" I shouted, my voice louder this time, finally breaking away from the mirror. He turned quickly, noticing the panic in my voice, but by the time he looked at the mirror, the distorted reflection had vanished. I was staring back at myself, my eyes wide with fear. Lucas tried to calm me down, but deep down, I knew what I had seen was real. And now, I had the unmistakable feeling that we weren't alone in that maze. The feeling of terror grew stronger with every step we took. Lucas noticed that I was no longer in the mood for fun, so he suggested we get out of there. The idea of leaving brought me temporary relief, but as we tried to find the exit, it felt like the maze was leading us back to the same spots. Every hallway we turned down brought us back to familiar mirrors, distorting our images in ways that now seemed increasingly menacing. The reflections began to seem more animated, almost alive. Each time we looked into the mirrors, they took a second longer to replicate our movements, as if they were purposely lagging behind. At one point, I could have sworn I saw Lucas' reflection turn left even though he was moving to the right. Panic was on the edge of breaking through. The space felt tighter, like the mirrors were closing in on us. Finally, after what felt like hours, we found the exit. The door was slightly ajar, as if it had been left that way on purpose, waiting for us to leave. Without hesitation, we bolted outside, breathing a sigh of relief as the cool night air hit us. We were back in the park. The lights blinked around us, and the distant sounds of laughter and music seemed normal again. But something felt off. Lucas looked at me with a mix of confusion and concern. "What happened in there?" he asked, but I had no answer. All I knew was that something had shifted, that the funhouse mirrors were far from harmless. We drove home in silence. I could still feel the weight of what I had seen, or maybe just imagined. But what disturbed me most was the feeling that it wasn't over. In the nights that followed, every time I looked into the mirror for just a split second, that distorted, malicious smile would appear again. Just for a moment. But it was enough to make me question whether I had really escaped the funhouse, or if a part of me had been left behind. So, let me tell you how it all started. We were just hanging out one night, bored with nothing to do, when James came up with this brilliant idea. What if we went to that abandoned park? You know how it goes. Everyone's heard the stories about how the place is haunted, how weird accidents happen there, and how no one has the guts to go there at night. At first we laughed. It seemed like just another one of those urban legends people make up to scare others. But after thinking about it for a bit, we decided to give it a shot. What could go wrong, right? So we grabbed the car and went. When we got there, I stood staring at those rusty gates, overgrown with weeds, and I have to admit, I felt something weird. But of course, I didn't say anything to anyone. The park was practically in ruins. The game booths were falling apart, the carousel was slowly turning because of the wind, and the roller coaster looked like this old, twisted metal structure that had definitely seen better days. It was all way too quiet, you know? Like the place felt dead, but at the same time like something there was still alive, just waiting. We went in laughing, making jokes about the stories we'd heard. No one actually believed the park could be haunted. It was just an excuse to break the routine and get a little adrenaline rush. And that's how I saw it too, at least at the beginning. We had barely walked a few meters through the park when we saw it for the first time. It was a figure standing off in the distance, near an old shooting gallery booth. At first, we thought it was just some old mannequin left behind and forgotten. It looked like a clown, one of those with smudged makeup, faded, colorful clothes, worn down by time. Of course we laughed. James even made a joke, saying the little clown was probably waiting for its next customers, and Mary snapped a picture, saying it would be the perfect cover for our paranormal adventure. But you know when something just feels off? I didn't say anything at the time, but that clown made me uneasy. It was too still, if you know what I mean. It looked too real, like it was waiting for us. But again, no one took it seriously. We kept walking through the park, laughing at jokes and pretending we were braver than we actually were. What really bothered me though was when, after a few more minutes of exploring, we passed by another attraction, and there was the clown again. Standing there just like before, but this time closer. I thought someone was messing with us, playing a prank or something. But there was no one around. The park was completely empty. Jimmy even asked if it was the same figure from earlier, but we were far from the shooting gallery booth. How could it have moved? Everyone laughed it off, but deep down you could feel the atmosphere shift. The air got heavier, and even the sounds of the wind seemed different. The truth is, from that moment on, no joke could make us feel safe anymore. That's when things really started to get weird. After a while we split up, you know? Not too far, just to explore a bit more of the park. I was with Jimmy and Mary went with James. The idea was to get a closer look at some of the attractions that were still standing. But when we met up again, where was James? He was gone. At first, we thought he was just messing with us, trying to scare us. Oh, he's probably hiding somewhere, waiting to jump out and freak us out, I thought. But as time passed, James still didn't show up. We called for him, walked through almost the entire park, but there was no sign of him anywhere. That's when things started to feel off. You know when you realize it's not just a joke anymore? Jimmy was trying to stay calm, but you could tell he was nervous too. Mary was already getting desperate, and I was trying to keep it together, but the park, which had already been creepy from the start, suddenly felt way more menacing. And then he appeared again. The clown. This time he was much closer, almost blocking the path we were going to take to get out. But this time he was clearly moving. He wasn't just a figure standing off in the distance anymore. He was walking, slowly, like he was following us. I felt a chill run up my spine and I grabbed Jimmy to run. Mary followed right behind us without even asking questions. We ran through the rusted attractions, hearing heavy footsteps behind us and that awful sound of distorted laughter echoing through the entire park. The worst part was when I looked back, I didn't see anything. Just the darkness of the park and silence. But I knew he was there. I knew he was close. We kept running, not even daring to look back. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest, and all I could think about was getting out of there as fast as possible. The park, which had once just seemed old and abandoned, now felt alive in a way that was wrong. The lights of the attractions flickered, even though there was no electricity. The rusted rides, which had been still before, made metallic creaking sounds, like they were moving on their own. It felt like the place was closing in on us, trying to trap us inside. Finally, we found a way out. It was a small opening in a collapsed fence, near one of the old food stands. I pulled Jimmy and Mary Nada to follow me. But as we squeezed through that opening, I had this eerie feeling that we were being watched from up close. It was like the clown was right there, waiting for us to slip up. But even with that horrible feeling, we managed to escape. Only when we made it outside did we realize James wasn't with us. I looked around, panting, but all I could see was the dark, silent park, as if nothing had happened. We called out for him, but only the wind answered back. Mary started crying, and Jimmy kept trying to call James's phone, but the calls wouldn't go through. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. After a while, with no idea what else to do, we left. But ever since that night, I can't stop thinking about what happened. Sometimes when I'm alone at night, I still hear that laughter. Faint, distant, but always there. And the last time I went back to the park just to try and make sense of it all, the gates were locked and wrapped in rusty chains. Like the place had never been open that night. James never came back. And the park? Well, it's still there waiting for anyone brave enough to enter again. Look, I'm not the kind of person who believes in ghosts or anything like that. I've always thought those stories were a bit exaggerated, made to scare the more impressionable types. So when my boss asked me to lock up the haunted house that night, I didn't think twice. It seemed like a simple task, you know? Just walk through the house, make sure everything was in order, and lock the doors. Shouldn't have been a big deal. It was the end of the day, the park was practically empty, and I was on my own. John, my coworker, even laughed at my mission before leaving, telling me to watch out for the little ghosts in the house. I laughed too, obviously. Who believes in that stuff nowadays? But when I stepped inside the house, I felt like the vibe was different. It wasn't just because it was dark or because of the creepy decor. It was like the place had a presence. The haunted house had always been one of the park's most popular attractions, but I never really paid much attention to it. From the outside, it looked like an old mansion with those arched windows and cracked walls, all decked out to be as scary as possible. Inside, the hallways were narrow, filled with creepy dolls and eerie sounds that played every now and then. But that night, with everything shut down, no kids screaming or attractions running, the silence inside was heavy. I started walking through the house, checking the rooms. At first, everything was normal like always. But when I walked down one of the main hallways, I saw a figure standing by one of the decorative windows. It was a woman wearing that classic white dress you always see on movie ghosts, you know? I knew she was part of the attraction, but there was something different about her. She seemed more real, like she was actually looking at me. I shook my head, thinking I was just being paranoid. It's just a mannequin, I thought. Nothing to worry about. I kept going with what I had to do, but somehow I couldn't get that figure out of my head. After walking past that figure, I kept moving through the house trying to focus on what I had to do, but the feeling that something was off just kept growing. As I walked through the hallways, I started hearing strange noises. At first, it was just a creaking sound like some old door moving in the wind. I ignored it, of course, figuring it was just the old structure of the house making its usual noises. But then the sounds became clearer. It was like someone else was walking around in there with me, slow, dragging footsteps. I tried to shrug it off, even though I was starting to feel a bit uneasy. I kept checking the rooms, giving them one last look before locking up. But every time I passed by that window where the woman's figure was, it seemed different. I tried convincing myself it was just in my head, that it was the atmosphere messing with me. You know how it is, right? Dark place, quiet surroundings, your mind starts playing tricks on you. But then I noticed something that made me stop dead in my tracks. That figure, it was in a different position. Before, she had been facing the window like she was looking outside. Now, it looked like her head had turned slightly, almost like she was watching me. No, that's impossible, I thought, trying to keep my cool. I had to be exaggerating, maybe it was just my exhaustion or something like that. I decided it was time to get out. I had done what I needed to do, so I headed for the exit door. But when I got there, the door wouldn't open. I turned the handle several times, but nothing. It was like it was locked from the inside. I tried not to panic. Maybe it was some kind of malfunction, a glitch in the locking mechanism. But at that moment, I started to feel like maybe I wasn't as alone as I had thought. At that moment, I could feel the fear really setting in. I kept trying to come up with a logical explanation for why the door wouldn't open, but man, nothing made sense. It was locked from the inside, and I couldn't remember doing anything different. I tried again, pushing and pulling. Still nothing. The silence around me seemed to grow heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath along with me. Then it happened. I turned to look down the hallway again, trying to think of another way out, and that's when I saw her. That same woman, the one who had been at the window earlier, was now standing in the middle of the hallway. I swear she was right there, standing with that white dress dragging along the floor, just staring at me. The worst part was she didn't move like a normal person, she kind of glided. There were no footsteps, no sound at all. My heart was pounding. I was frozen, not knowing what to do. I tried to scream for help, but my voice wouldn't come out properly. The park was empty anyway, so yelling was pointless, but it was the only thing I could think to do. And she kept coming. Slowly, but getting closer with every second. I had this overwhelming feeling that if she got too close, something terrible was going to happen, but I had no idea what. Then it got worse. She started whispering. I couldn't make out what she was saying. It sounded like some ancient language mixed with echoes. With every step she took, the whispering grew louder, more distinct. Panic started to kick in hard. I was trapped with no way out, and that woman, that ghost, kept coming toward me. In that moment, all the skepticism I had about ghosts and this kind of stuff vanished. This was real, and it was coming for me. I can't really explain how I managed to move in that moment. It was like my legs were frozen, but the sheer terror took over, and that's what made me react. When that thing, whatever it was, got close enough that I could almost feel it hovering over my shoulder, I threw myself to the side and bolted down the hallway in the opposite direction. I wasn't thinking about anything else. I just wanted to get out of there no matter what. I passed by locked doors and windows, tripped over some mannequins scattered on the floor, and all I could hear were her whispers, now mixed with what sounded like heavy breathing right behind me. That's when I lost it, man. There was no staying calm or thinking logically anymore. I just knew I had to get out, or I don't even want to think about what could have happened. Then I saw it, a beat-up old window on the side of the house, barely holding together. I didn't think twice. I went straight for it. I started pushing, forcing it with everything I had, until the wood began to give. I heard the glass cracking and, without thinking, threw myself against the window. I managed to break through, dragging myself outside, feeling the shards cutting into my skin, but in that moment it didn't matter. When I finally got out, I ran as far away from the house as I could without looking back. My breathing was ragged, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. It wasn't until I was outside, far away from the house, that I looked back. And there she was, standing in the doorway watching me. She wasn't moving anymore, but I could feel it. She was still staring at me, almost as if she was just waiting for the right moment to come after me again. Since that night, I haven't been the same. I never told anyone about it. Who would believe me, right? The park is still there, still running, and the haunted house is still one of the most popular attractions. But I never went back. And sometimes, on quieter nights, it feels like she's still watching me from somewhere. In my dreams, in the reflection of a window, or in some dark corner. She's still there, somehow, stuck in my mind as a constant reminder of that night.